I just finished watching John David Ebert's latest installment on Oswald Spengler's Decline of the West, Volume 2. I believe it's Chapter 2. And in the second part, it's a two-parter. In the second part, he mentions how Spengler shows the development and process of the city and the mentality within the city. And it comes a point where there's this really high intellect, and it's just intellect in a high form, detached from the plant-like vegetal Dasein of just being in nature, because it's developed so long in the city. And it got me thinking, and it was exciting to think about it because of my personal experience of my parents moving out of the city, the world city of the Bay Area, to where I was at. He mentioned how there's a depopulation that occurs to the large cities, to the world cities, and it reminded me of a particular character that Joseph Campbell talks about, the wandering sage. And the city stops being productive, and the wandering sage, dying organism, just sends out all these living cells. It just dissolves. And I was thinking of my parents, and I was thinking, because Spengler makes the point, and Ebert elaborates on it, that this is all unconscious stuff that's going on. And they use an example from Rome, and where the large cities are being depopulated. They actually have to try to convince people by giving them citizenship to go run these farms. And that sounds very familiar to me to the government paying farmers to farm certain things. But anyway, instead of farming what they want, they're farming what they're paid to farm. And this is the point of art, and this is the difference between art and art therapy, is that the art therapy is taking care of something that's become a problem. And that's what, I think of Adele and her latest work that got all this accolades. She admits openly that if she didn't have a terrible relationship that she was processing through, then this creative work of hers wouldn't have ever come to fruition. So it was that passion of trying to resolve a problem that created the work of art. And same thing with the farmers. But in my instance, my family left the city because it never longer spoke to them. I don't think. They haven't gone at length as to their feelings of everything that was going on, because there were personal things and going on. But in a more general, detached way, I am wondering, it came to my view and perspective that there could be a possibility that I'm sort of a holdover or influenced by these world city inhabitants, yet also influenced by this very country village setting and environment. And it became very interesting to me because my creative imagination started thinking about, what type of woman would be that match, to be the match of that. Finding our place in time is very interesting to me. Someone who finds their place in time is a very interesting idea, yes. However, the important thing is that in the development of the city, in the beginning, it's the life pulse that is predominant. Let us discover life. But it gets to a point where the death instinct takes over. And it's not conscious. And no matter what happens, they fight it. They're going to die. The city's going to die. And there's examples that they give, but they're only examples. And with my personal experience that I was sharing in this entry today about having faced death and loss, it was just perfect timing where I shared this in my video and then I saw it in Ebert's clips today. And for me, that serendipity can be very telling. But the idea of woman finding a confidant, a companion, has been very difficult for me. And I look back on the ladies that I've chosen and those who I'm interested in, and how I inflamed my image of them in my mind so that I fall in love, so that I did fall in love. Not that I was willing that, it just came upon me. But this is very typical of any psychological issue that's come to consciousness, is that something comes over us and possesses us as an image that speaks to the depth of our being, even though we're unaware of what it means until after we see its whole life cycle. You can't really know a thing until you see its birth, rise, decline, and death. And then once you see the whole life cycle, you can really come to know it. But the problem is with knowing is that once you know it, has the magic left it. So the experience is very important, that through it we are left with a life affirming experience rather than a life negating experience. And it is what it is. We're not always, sometimes it's a deal breaker, as Dr. Phil would like to say. Is it a deal breaker? Is that a deal breaker? Or I would call that a deal breaker. He's got his deal breakers. There are these certain aspects in consciousness that he cannot integrate, and it becomes a deal breaker in which he has to sever the tie. And this is very acceptable to him for his way of life. However, for myself, I suspect that somebody who can afford to negate certain aspects of life can negate much more of life than someone who can't afford, who just can't afford to negate large swaths of life, as negative. Anyway, the Burgoyce is what I think of. I'm not sure if I have my terms correct there, but so stuck up. Someone who can afford to, spend millions and millions and millions on whatever they want. It's just, instead of something life productive. But he's tending toward the light. He's trying, he's working it. But for my instant, I just find it really telling that I still desire. I've been waiting for it. Is that vigorous vitality still there within me that says yes to life, that wants to affirm life, find life's affirmation? And usually, generally speaking, it is of the feminine persuasion. It doesn't necessarily have to be a female. Generally speaking, for myself it does, but for myself it takes that image. However, the feminine can come in multiple and various forms, as well as the masculine. But the feminine is life affirming, and the masculine, it's hard for me to say this, but generally speaking, to categorize it and define it, the masculine could be life negating. it's just very, very interesting to me, these concepts. Anyway, I wanted to share that because I feel in my life that finding the woman that is my match, that has this intellect of the city, but has not become contaminated with the death and with the death impulse, because a high intellect in these definitions is a sign of detaching oneself from the life pulse, the primal root. And so overthinking a thing can analyze the life right out of it. So too much intellectualization, but intellectualization is born of a cycle that has gone past its youth. So all these things very interesting to me. Just what possibility is it? If you have an image in your mind, you can start looking for it. You can start gauging things, and it's very interesting. Someone that is a little bit of country, a little bit of rock and roll kind of thing. Very, very interesting.